Way back in the forgotten year of 1992, an era that is perfectly represented with cigarettes and greasy men in flannels, French publisher Infogrames released their landmark horror title, Alone in the Dark. Developed by Frederic Reinal, the game, while definitely antiquated by today's standards, is considered by many to be the first real example of a survival horror video game. Though many people consider Capcom's horror RPG Sweet Home, which was released earlier in 1989, to be the first survival horror video game, Alone in the Dark's core gameplay is much more in line with contemporary horror titles. In fact, Alone in the Dark's gameplay was even a major influence in the development of everyone's favorite zombie franchise, Resident Evil. The series saw 3 main installments and a small promotional spin-off between 1992 and 1995. The first reboot of the series, Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, was released in 2001 to capitalize on the now rampant success of the Resident Evil series, dipping headfirst into the glorious edge of the early 2000s. While all of these games are pretty well received, Alone in the Dark had its first major stumble with the franchise's second reboot in 2008. The 2008 reboot was full of its own special brand of jank and unfortunately had numerous bugs and technical issues. Reviews for the game were actually so bad that Atari, who owned the rights to Alone in the Dark at the time, threatened legal action against review sites that had published a negative review. But this is America, by God, and we can speak our minds however we please. And just like the liberal crybabies Atari is, they ended up doing exactly nothing against the sites that had published a negative review. And now, Alone in the Dark 2008 stands as a shining reminder of what the series could have been. It wasn't until 2015 that we got another installment titled Alone in the Dark Illumination. To be honest, I hadn't even heard of this game until I started doing research for this video, but apparently it was supposed to be some kind of action horror cooperative game, sort of like a mix between Overwatch and Left 4 Dead, but honestly that's a pretty reductive comparison. Illumination was such a disaster, it made the 2008 reboot look like a masterpiece. It was effectively the killing blow for the franchise, forcing Atari to sell the rights to the series to THQ Nordic back in 2018. But as is the curse with every popular franchise, nothing can stay dead forever, and on March 20th, 2024, Alone in the Dark was revived once again with a third reboot in the series. Hey, you know what they say? Third time's the charm, right? The latest installment in the Alone in the Dark franchise is yet another reboot and a reimagining of the first game in the series, because creativity is dead and we are living in an endless cycle of media regurgitation. It takes a number of characters and themes from the original 3 games and incorporates them into its own new original story. You take the shoes of either Private Detective Edward Carnby or Emily Hartwood, traveling to the mysterious Derceto Manor, a home for the mentally ill, to investigate the sudden disappearance of Emily's uncle, Jeremy. One of the most notable things about this game is its choice of casting for both Edward and Emily in David Harbour and Jodie Comer. Now, normally, casting in your game isn't that big of a deal, but when you snag a couple A-listers like this, it becomes a lot more important. So important, in fact, that the developers, Pisces Interactive, really wanted you to know how big of a deal it was they got these two in their game, because one of the first things you see on the game's Steam page is a huge GIF showing that these two esteemed thespians are a part of this project. Now, obviously, Harbour and Comer are 2 extremely skilled actors, but I just can't help but feel like they are not giving their all in their performances for this game. Aside from a couple high-intensity moments, they really just feel dejected and emotionless at everything that's going on around them.
Is it alcohol?
God, no, I just got the wind knocked out of me. I think I know how to break the contract with the Dark Man.
What exactly does that mean?
Everything going back to normal.
All right. I found some more information on Derceto and the patients. There are some seriously strange things going on here. I'm pretty sure 2 of the patients are dead and maybe even the clerk.
Oh yeah, I kind of just gave up on worrying about that.
Well, just keep your eyes open, I suppose.
It's entirely possible this is how they were directed to play these characters, but it is a little odd when you have someone witness horrific, unexplainable things and they brush it off with such a blasé attitude. All of this is especially more apparent when you compare them to the rest of the cast, who all give compelling and, for lack of a better term, and I mean this as good as possible, strange performances that perfectly fit the weirdness of a Lovecraftian-inspired story. Even the voiceovers for random exposition notes have incredible narration that adds so much weight to what is often just a throwaway piece of lore.
I did it. I crossed the thresholds to my intended destination without a focusing device. My talisman now knows these roads.
Personally, this seems to be a trend when you get big-time celebrities involved with projects like this. Now, I know obviously there are some exceptions to this, but as much as I hate to admit it, compared to movies, TV shows, or even music, video games just aren't respected as a form of art like those other mediums are. They're barely respected right above street musicians or mediocre YouTube reviewers. Harbour and Comer's lackluster performances are only hindered further by the fact that the facial animations for every character are pretty much non-existent. Every person in this game feels like they just domed about 15 Botox injections, and when they actually do show some emotion, it kinda crosses over into the uncanny valley a little bit. I've also seen a lot of people dog on this game's graphics, and while I do agree it's not the most breathtaking game on the market, it's nowhere near as bad as what people are making it out to be. I even saw one person say that the game looks as good as an Xbox 360 game. Now, I have to say, that is an absolute clown take. Is the game so realistic it makes the outside look like RuneScape? No, of course not. But it looks good. And to me, the graphics have this strange charm to them that meshes well with the overall mystical and eldritch vibe of the game. As with every horror game released today, Alone in the Dark takes the more action-oriented, over-the-shoulder approach popularized by the recent Resident Evil remakes. However, unlike those remakes, Alone in the Dark has nowhere near the same level of polish or fluidity to its gameplay. Now, this isn't to say the gameplay is complete garbage. In fact, it's perfectly passable for a game of this type, and honestly, I kind of enjoyed how slower paced it was compared to other recently released horror games. But it's just lacking a lot of the finer details that would take it from meh to eh. Gunplay is decent enough, though there were a few moments where I felt like my shots did absolutely nothing.
What the fuck?
But melee combat is extremely clunky and is little more than just spamming the button until something dies. The game also tries to inject some stealth gameplay into the mix that just does not mesh well with the rest of the experience at all. Aside from one area, I never felt like the stealth actually worked how it was supposed to. It also incorporates the throw things to distract enemies gimmick, but its implementation was absolutely horrible. You can't store throwables in your inventory, and you have to hold down a button to aim wherever it is you're trying to throw, only throwing the item when you let go of the button. So you'll constantly be crab clawing your keyboard as you slow walk close enough to an enemy. Truthfully, it feels like all of these stealth mechanics were just a last-minute attempt to pad out the already pretty lacking gameplay, but obviously that did not work out. And to be honest, if you're not putting a lot of time and effort and depth into your stealth mechanics, just don't put them in. Just forget about them. It makes the game worse if they're not up to par. While Alone in the Dark's combat may be average at best, I have to say I was kind of surprised at the quality of the puzzles presented in this game. Of course, as with every survival horror game, there are a number of puzzles that just boil down to finding an object to place on another object, but there were quite a few of them that were genuine brain teasers. The only real downside to this is that in the game's initial hours, they establish a handful of puzzle mechanics that are frequently repeated throughout the game. And what initially felt innovative quickly begins to feel repetitive. Seeing how this is the current hot button gaming discourse, I can't wait to see how certified gamers TM rip this game to pieces for going very, very hard in the yellow paint with their hint objectives and vocal narrator clues. You can't take more than 3 steps without the game giving you a reminder of your current objective or having your character casually announce an extremely obvious clue. But if you're a real epic gamer, you can turn all this accessibility stuff off. I decided to keep it all turned on because I'm confident in my lack of gaming ability to admit that I'm too stupid to play video games more complex than Peppa Pig World Adventures. And speaking of being a brainlet, I don't know if I was just too stupid to follow it or if it really is that poorly written, but Alone in the Dark story is an absolute mess. They probably hired those writers for that awful, depressing Glasgow Willy Wonka experience. What starts off as a simple search for a missing relative unravels into a winding mystery dripping with eldritch intrigue. You know, your classic your classic par for the course pulp horror plotline. But in just a couple hours, the story loses any sense of cohesion and becomes a rambling mess. Characters have little development or depth, and none of the side cast adds anything of substance to the story at large. Characters appear and vanish seemingly at random, briefly dropping a crumb of spooky dialogue, or, more often, a bunch of rambling nonsense that is little more than word salad. I guess it's attempting to go for some weird, spacey, Lovecraftian vibe, but it all just falls flat. The game tries to convey themes of sacrifice, overcoming past trauma, and atoning for sins, but the poor execution makes it feel extremely amateurish. Plus, the story is abysmally short for a $60 game, and when I play horror games, I like to take my time, go slow, absorb the environment, look for hidden things, and I still beat this game in under 8 hours. If I'm being entirely frank, Alone in the Dark does not feel like a $60 game at all. It really does feel like one of those crappy 50s spooky horror magazines, but with none of the campiness or charm. Now, if you can grab this for 30, maybe 40 bucks at most, and want to kill some time with a decent horror experience, there are definitely worse ways to spend your money. In the end, Alone in the Dark's most recent reboot does little to improve upon the genre the series established over 30 years ago, and while it's far from the worst game ever made, let alone the worst game in its own franchise, it just doesn't reach the heights that the games had back in 1992. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. I want to apologize for the gap in videos as of late. As usual, life has dropped a number of things right on my lap, and I have been getting over a fairly rough bout of COVID, still fighting a bit of a cough that has made recording this video very, very fun, but I'm on the mend now and back to making videos. So if you did enjoy, please leave a like, let me know what you thought of the video down in the comments below, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Take care.